Hey, this is Guy from New Plastic, and damn are we gonna have fun today. We're gonna go crazy procedural and create these abstract, alien-looking rock structures, all 100% procedural, really trying to push the limit of Octane's node system. I made a pack of 18 really unique materials, all fully procedural. If you feel like you need them, check them out on my Gumroad, link is in the description. Also, if you want to support me in making more and better content, check out the Patreon and YouTube membership, where you can also get the tutorial project files, my own personal project files, free products, early access, and more. Huge kiss on the cheeks to all my phenomenal patrons and members: Elad, Spencer Clark, Abhishek Singh, Lynn, KV Davey, Yining Gong, Guillaume Lopez, The Great Wanderer Studios, Harley Spick, Henango Cerrone, Dave Toro, Neil Pollack, Boulder Bull, Quarantine Peugeot, Kiki Lem, Sophia Wilton, MS, Emmanuel Ornelas, 3D Monkey Biz, Kaylor, Jake, She Was Lost, Pierre-Marie Burton, Chris Schultz, Braganate, Mariano Carnevale, Bob, Moworks Limited, Arlen, Elijah Jackson, Stav Sobolev, and everybody else on the list. I love you all. Follow me on Instagram at Ojang, subscribe, share, hit the bell, eat fermented food to get that good gut bacteria. Let's go. Alright, so I have this extrahedron type sphere here, and I don't want the live viewer to move around as I move the camera, so I can click on this camera icon here and it'll lock the live viewer. So now I can move around and exit the camera view freely. I'm kind of going for a dramatic outer space type mood, so I have a strong rheum light here coming from the back and one large kind of weak light far away just to diffuse the shadow. And you can see without it, the shadows get completely black because I got no ambient light at all. I can always increase the contrast in post if I want more black shadows. You can pause and see my kernel settings. I ended up rendering the intro at 1048 samples. I'm compressing the highlights a little bit, and I also turned on the bloom pretty high, but I also upped the cutoff pretty high, so the bloom only happens on the brightest areas and not the whole image. You can see how only the highlights bloom now, and I can even tone it down a little bit. So let's start by quickly making a procedural rock using a displacement deformer, and it's usually best to use an hexahedron type so we get pretty uniform quad polymesh for better deformation. I'll also up the segments a little bit, then I'll add displacement while pressing shift, so it'll automatically add it as a child of my sphere, and in the shading tab I'll add a layer. Here you can layer up several different noises to get more intricate deformation. So I'll add two noises. The top one I'll set as Voronoi 3. I'll increase the scale and just play around with the brightness and contrast and see till I feel like I'm at a nice starting point. Then I'll click on the arrow button to go back to the layers, and I'll go into the second noise. When I start playing with it, I see nothing is happening, and that's because the top noise in our layer is the only one showing right now. So I'll set it at multiply blending, and now we can see the bottom noise only through the white areas of the top noise. And if you know blending modes from Photoshop, you'll understand it better, but you can play with different blending to get different effects. Now I can play around with the bottom noise to break up the top noise a bit. That looks okay. I can reduce the opacity of the top noise as well to blend them even more. And if I add a subdivision surface, we can see we get a pretty cool random rock structure, but it's a bit too soft and cushy for me, so I'll add a second displacement. And in the shading, I'll add a full white color, which displaces all the polygons together in the direction that I choose. And now if I go to the Object tab, I can pull the displacement into the negative, and actually I'll drag the second displacement under the first one. And now you can see that these fluffy edges become way more pinched and sharp, which definitely feels more like a rock. You don't want to overdo it, otherwise the edges will start overlap from the inside out, so just do it until you get some pinching. Now you can stop here, but if you want to have a flat bottom, for example, if you're going to place the rock on a flat surface, we can duplicate the displacement, and let's hide the other ones for now and call this flat displacement. And this one, I'll add a linear fall off, and I'll align it to wherever I want the flat surface to be. And you can see it's actually reversed, so I'll flip the fall off over. Now we're starting to see something, but there's still a bulge, so I can try and change the direction to planar and set the orientation to -y. Changing the type doesn't really matter. But what does remove the bulge is the distance of the fall off. So when I start increasing the fall off distance, you can see the bulge is going away. Now I can increase the height segments of the displacement and play with the fall off distance and position until I get the flat look that I want. And if I turn on the other displacement, you can see we have that rock with a flatter bottom, which is great. Really cool, and you can always go into the noise layers and play with the seeds and get different looks in seconds. Cool. Another way is to simply sculpt the rock that we want. It won't be procedural, but we'll have much more artistic control over the look. So again, I'll add an hexahedron sphere. I'll go to the sculpt layout, and as I showed you in the last quick tip, I'll click the volume mesh cogwheel, choose the voxel resolution I want, let's say 5, and start sculpting away. Every now and then I'll hit the volume mesh again to recalculate the mesh, and we'll increasingly lower the voxel size when getting into more detailed sculpting. We don't want to get too detailed here because the details are going to come from the material itself. We want to keep a low poly count on the object. Once I'm done, I'll go back to the main layout And I like to have the axis point set at the bottom center of the object. So I'll hit L and drag the axis where I want it to be, then hit L again. Cool. Let's hit the live viewer and start texturing. Let me just get a nice angle on this. And let's add a universal material. Bloom is way too strong, so let me just increase the cutoff and tone it down. Okay, let's bring the metallic all the way down. Let's actually remove all the channels we don't need, like sheen, anisotropy, coding, opacity, and emission, just to keep the node system as clean as possible. We'll start by adding 2 Octane noises. Set the projection to XYZ to UVW. Then add an add node and combine both noises. And also I'm going to put a gradient node after the second noise and then connect it all to the albedo channel. Let's solo the gradient node and play around with the noise. For type, we can probably just set parallel. And I'll increase the omega, octaves, and contrast to get more details. Let's change the color in the gradient to something we like and solo the add node and change the type of the first noise to circular and up the details on it as well as up the gamma to get less whites. I'll add a gradient node to it as well and I'll keep the black but change the white to some light contrasting color like maybe a light blue or something. Cool, let me just get a better close-up and play with the scale, details, and gamma of the first noise. I'll also darken the blue just a little bit. Alright, let's unsolo that. And I'm going to plug this whole color system to the bump channel as well. And what I like about this is that now the bump texture follows the color texture. So the darker colors will be pushed down a bit and the lighter up. I feel like it just gives more realism than having totally separate bump and color noises. I'll add another noise and plug it into the roughness channel. And I'll attach the same projection to it as well. And let's solo it and up the details, up the gamma, and contrast to get more sparse patches of white. I want it to be pretty rough, but the bump channel is very strong, which helps make the specular very rough as well. Alright, now we can go to the real deal, which is the displacement channel. That's where all the juicy details are going to come from. I'll add a displacement node, change the type to vertex, and change the height to something pretty small like 1 or 2. Obviously, it depends on your model scale, but we want to focus on details and not large displacement. We already did that with the deformers. I'll control drag to duplicate this noise and attach the projection to it. And I'll add another noise as well. And we're going to combine this one with the first one to get some nice details. Let's see how this one looks, and it looks okay. This is going to give us the small details, so I can just leave it as is. However, with the top noise, I want to get these flowy water sediments look. So I'll change the type to turbulence and bring the octaves and omega way down. So I just see these clean flowy lines. And I'll also up the contrast to get sharper edges. Now let's combine both noises with an add node, so the white parts of the top noise will overlap on the bottom noise. And I'll add a gradient node to the top noise and make the white more gray so that we still see some of the texture from the bottom noise through the white parts. Awesome. Now let's duplicate the add node and the fluid noise, plug the projection, and let's combine them all together. And I'll add a transform node to the new noise to adjust the position and get an extra level of sediments. Now I can also untick lock ratio and stretch it a little. Cool. Let's see how it looks, and we barely see anything, and that's because we need to increase the subdivision level in the displacement node. So I'll up it to, let's say, 3. You want to be careful with the levels because higher levels will really bog down your scene, so it's best to start low and only raise it by a little bit if you need more detail. Also, the closer you are to the model, the higher levels you would need. So if you're far, you don't need a lot of levels. Another thing I would do here is turn on auto bump. That just gives another level of details which would really fit something like a rock texture. The more textured, the better. Okay, we're starting to look good. Let's add even another noise and combine it with all of our other noises using a multiply node. With this, I want to make these round cavities in the rock, so I'll change the type to circular. I'll invert it, then bring down the gamma and up the contrast. Now I can either bring the octaves all the way up and omega way down to get larger circles with slightly irregular edges, or I can bring the octaves down and omega up to get smaller and cleaner circles. I like the larger irregular circles, so I'll just add a transform node to scale it down a bit. Then I can play with the gamma and increase or decrease the size of each individual circle. Nice. And I'll just add a gradient node to it, which will basically help me dictate the contour of the cavities. Okay, I think I can increase the displacement height to 2 and actually up the mid-level to 0.5 so that the black will actually depress into the model and the whites will extrude. I think the small details in the displacement are too strong, so I'll add a gradient node here. Actually, no, I'll add it to the very first noise because that's where all the small details come from. So I'll bring down the contrast by changing the black to dark gray and the white to light gray. And yes, this is much better. Okay, let's add some color details. I'll add a dirt node so I can get access to the cavities and give them a darker color. So let's plug the dirt node into the albedo channel so we can see the effect. And I'll just reduce the subdivision level so I can get a quicker response when editing. So you see the dirt node is coloring each cavity in black, which is good. I'll up the strength to 10 and also up the radius to get a larger spread. Let's plug one of our noises to the dirt map to break up the dirt node a little bit. And I'll just add a gradient node in between to increase the contrast. Okay, let's combine the dirt node with our colors with a multiply node. And I'll add a gradient node to change the black color to something a bit more interesting, maybe like a dark blue. Nice, looks okay. Let's bring down the strength a little and let's solo the dirt map. I want to break it even more, so I'll increase the blacks so you see less of the dirt node effect. Yeah, that's much better. I think I have too much sedimentary details actually, so I'll just go back to the turbulent noises in the displacement system and bring down the contrast on those a little bit. And I'll increase the scale of the very top one to get larger details. And also up the gamma, and yeah, this is much better. So pretty. Okay, I just want to go back to the dirt node and just tone it down a little bit. There's too much black in my opinion. I'll just isolate this region to get a quicker response. And let's try to use another heavier noise as the dirt map. And this might be better, and I'll just increase the amount of black in the gradient node so we expose less of the dirt. And I'll decrease the radius by a little bit and increase the whites on the dirt map. But then I'll bring down the spread and bring up the tolerance, which essentially tones down the dirt effect on certain details. And now I can actually expose the dirt map even more. And I'll also bring in the dark blue of the dirt gradient node to darken it just a little bit. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, do we stop here? Hell nah. Let's add another dirt node. This time I want to get access to the edges of the rock. So I'll crank up the strength and take invert normals. And now the edges get colored black. I'll crank the tolerance and distribution all the way up to kind of choke the spread and maybe up the radius a little bit. Let's look at another part. And yeah, that looks okay. Let's plug in some dirt map, or actually it's gradient node. Can increase the radius a little bit. Let's add a gradient node to the dirt and increase the contrast on it. And actually I'll reverse the gradient node so that the edges are white. Let's look at the whole thing. Sick. Maybe I'll reduce the radius actually a little. Maybe just increase the black a little on the dirt map to break it up even more. Let's combine the new dirt with the color system using an add node and plug the whole thing into the albedo. Cool, now I'm actually going to plug the edges dirt node into the metallic channel. So now all the edges have a metallic surface. You can barely see it now because the surface is so rough. Even if I make the whole thing metallic, you can barely notice it. But if I remove the bump channel, you can see the surface is actually metallic. So what I'm going to do is combine the bump node we had with the edge dirt node using an add node, which will basically tell the bump channel to be almost full white on the edges and therefore not so rough. So we get a little more of the metallic specular on the edges. Let's plug everything back in, and to spice it up even more, I'll turn on thin film and just play around with it till I get the look I'm fine with. And look at that, we get this beautiful iridescent dust on the edges of our rock. This is so sick. And you can play around with the dirt node to expose more or less of the effect, but damn, this is cool. And to make things even more adjustable, I can add a color correction node to the whole color system and play with the hue to quickly change the whole color scheme to my likings. Or of course, go back and fiddle with individual color gradients and noises to change colors. And if I want to tone down the metallic edges, I can duplicate the gradient node of the edge dirt node and plug it into the metallic channel and make the white a bit darker. And just a little last adjustments of the colors. Dope. Let's get a nicer angle on this. And if I click this F button, I can click wherever I want the camera to focus on. And then in the Octane camera tag, I can up the aperture to bring things out of focus. And just readjust the camera again and make sure to click again where you want it to focus. And probably want to increase subdivision levels now. Beautiful. Let's duplicate the material and see how it looks on the other rock that we made in the beginning. So I can already tell I'll want to adjust the way those flowy sedimentary displacements look. So I'll just go ahead and play with their scale and rotation and the noise gamma and contrast till I get the look that I like. Nice. Let's go to the most bottom displacement noise and make the whole gradient darker so the sediments push up further away from it. Cool. Let's zoom in to get a nicer look, and we can click where we want to focus. Really nice. Let's bring down the contrast of that middle sediment displacement. Cool. I love it. Let's keep editing. I'll duplicate the camera to get a different angle. Click where I want to focus, duplicate the material, and let's change that middle sediment noise type to circular. And let's just solo the whole displacement system to see better what we're doing. And I'll just up the gamma to expose less of the noise and get smaller circles. Let's go to the noise above it and change it to chips, up the octaves and omega to get more detail, and up the gamma to expose more of those black cracks. This is pretty nice. Let's actually up the details of the circular noise to break it up a little. And in its gradient node, make the whites a bit darker. Okay, let's just plug these three noises into the displacement and put that fourth one aside. I don't think we'll need it. And let's see how we're looking. Ooh, that's nice. I like these cracks. Let's give those cracks some more color. So I'll plug the cavity dirt node we have into the albedo to see how it looks on its own. And let's just remove the dirt map, and I'll bring down the radius a tiny bit, remove the tolerance and up the spread a little, and also get more contrast in the gradient node, and maybe bring down the radius even more. It's cool, but it's not getting those cracks to be fully colored like I want to. So let's try another way. I'm going to take the whole displacement noise system and plug it into the gradient node instead of the dirt node. And we know that in the displacement noises, those cracks are dark, so they'll displace inwards, which means that the gradient node will paint all those cracks in that purple color. And that actually kind of looks perfect. I can choke the whites a bit more to get more contrast, and yeah, that's awesome. Let's plug the whole color system into the albedo, and look at that, exactly what I wanted, and even more resource efficient than having another dirt node. Okay, sick. Now, I actually don't want the edges to be more metallic this time, so I'll remove the edge dirt from the metallic channel. And now the whole thing is metallic and also iridescent, so let's bring down the metallicness. Let's quickly clean up the nodes here, so I'll get rid of this and align these. And what I actually want to do is have the metal appear only as tiny chips. So I'll add another noise and plug it into the metallic. Let's solo it, up the contrast, change type to chips, and scale it way down till we get many tiny chips. And let's up the contrast even more. I really want to get almost only black and white. We can scale it down way more. Nice, let's clean it up and see how we're looking. And it's stuck on the albedo channel, so I'll change it to path tracing over here. And yeah, we can barely notice the metallic chips, and that's because we need the albedo to be white wherever there's metal. So let's just combine this chips with the color system using an add node, plug that into the albedo, and we can kind of notice it, but not much. Let's bring down the thin film because it's distracting, and now we can start noticing it more. So one last thing I'll do is also add those chips to the bump channel. So I'll add the noise to the add node of the bump channel, and I'll just bring down the gamma just a tiny bit to get slightly larger chips. And let's just zoom in a little to see it better. And I'll bring down the omega a bit to get them slightly more uniform. Okay. Let's solo the color for a second and yeah, bring down the details on them and actually up the gamma back to make them smaller. And what I actually want to do is combine them with the bump using a multiply node instead of an add node, and then plug that noise in through an invert node. So now those chips will be pushed down a little. You can see how the bump channel looks now, and if we unsolo it, oh yes, so dope, wow. That's kind of perfect. Should we spice it up with some thin film? Fuck it, why not? So damn pretty. All right, I think we're done here. Now I can simply go to our displacement deformer on the rock objects and just play with the seeds of the noises to get different rock shapes, which is so awesome, dude. And if we get these overlapping edges, we can go to our second displacement deformer and just bring up the strength until they don't overlap anymore. Yeah, man, we're done with this one. I'll make another video showing even more possibilities of explorations using these techniques to get different looks. But yeah, I hope you're really able to see how powerful and intricate the node system can be and how fun it is to work procedurally. Make sure to check out the Procedural Alien Rock Pack on my Gumroad or subscribe to my Patreon. I love you. Have a great day. Peace.